I drove through the blinding snow for 24 hours to surprise my family for Christmas. Instead, I found my 11-year-old daughter crying in the greenhouse while my husband toasted his new fiancée inside. The worst part, he had told all his wealthy guests I died in combat 6 months ago to launch a multi-million-dollar charity in my memory. He thought he could bury a soldier and steal her life. He was dead wrong. Hello and welcome back to Maya Revenge Stories. We want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your continuous support, but unfortunately, YouTube has demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep operating, which means we will soon have to stop publishing new public videos here. If you enjoyed today's story, please support us by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon, where you can listen to even more incredible, exclusive true stories that are longer, feature highly detailed situations we cannot post on YouTube, and are brought to life by multiple emotional voice actors. You can join us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link in the description or the pinned comment of this video. Now, let us dive into today's story about Major Greta Schroeder. I am Major Greta Schroeder. At 35 years old, my life was heavily regimented by the strict, unyielding demands of the military. I had just spent months stationed at the Ethelgard Tactical Hub, a remote space command center where isolation is just another part of the uniform. By the time I secured authorization to return home 4 days early, I was running on pure adrenaline. I drove my heavy-duty truck through a violent, blinding blizzard for hundreds of miles, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. The freezing wind battered my windshield, but the only thing keeping me awake was the thought of my family. I was desperate to surprise my husband, Julian, and our 11-year-old daughter, Maya, for Christmas. I kept picturing our quiet, beautiful home nestled in the affluent, gated community of Pinecrest Ridge. I imagined the soft crackle of a fireplace, the scent of pine needles, and a peaceful evening wrapped in the warmth of the people I loved most. However, as my tires crushed the fresh snow along our private, winding driveway, the peaceful illusion of my homecoming shattered instantly. Our sprawling, multi-million-dollar estate was completely illuminated, shining like an exclusive, high-society gala. Dozens of luxury sports cars and imposing black sedans were parked along the frosted pavement. Valets in pristine winter coats hurried back and forth through the falling snow, opening doors for people draped in designer furs and tailored suits. Through the massive bay windows, I could see a swarm of the city's business elite. They were laughing, drinking, and mingling under the brilliant, cascading light of our crystal chandeliers. Uniformed waiters moved effortlessly through the crowded living room, carrying silver trays filled with expensive champagne flutes and gourmet appetizers. It was an extravagant, suffocatingly opulent event, and I had absolutely no idea it was happening. A heavy, sickening knot formed in the pit of my stomach. Instead of storming through the front doors and demanding an explanation, my tactical training took over. I stepped away from the bright, welcoming lights of the main entrance and slipped silently into the shadows, making my way around the perimeter of the property toward the backyard. The thick snow crunched softly beneath my heavy combat boots as the bitter cold bit at my face. That was when my eyes caught a faint, isolated glow coming from the far end of the garden. It was my custom-built greenhouse, typically a quiet sanctuary reserved for my rare orchids. The structure was heavily insulated, fully heated, and perfectly safe from the harsh winter elements. But the sight inside made my heart stop entirely. My sweet 11-year-old Maya was sitting completely alone on a rustic wooden bench surrounded by blooming exotic plants. She was wearing a stunning dark velvet holiday dress that looked incredibly expensive, but her tiny frame was curled into a ball of misery. Her beautiful face was deeply flushed and stained with heavy, endless tears. Resting awkwardly on her lap was a delicate porcelain plate holding a thick slice of cake that had clearly gone cold. Surrounded by the warmth of the heaters and the vibrant flowers, she looked utterly abandoned, cast aside like an unwanted prop in her own home. I took a slow, agonizing step toward the glass, But a sudden roar of applause from the main house caught my attention. Through the wide dining room windows facing the yard, I saw Julian. He was standing confidently at the head of our long mahogany table, looking impeccably handsome in a sharp, tailored tuxedo. He was raising a crystal glass, commanding the attention of every wealthy guest in the room. Standing intimately close to him, clinging to his arm, was a breathtakingly beautiful young woman. When she raised her delicate hand to brush a lock of hair from her face, a massive, brilliant diamond ring flashed violently under the overhead lights. I watched Julian's lips move, and I watched the crowd smile and clap in admiration. He was proudly introducing this stranger, Vanessa, as the new lady of the house. My lungs felt like they were filling with ice. I turned away from the house and pushed open the heavy glass door of the greenhouse. It clicked shut behind me, instantly silencing the howling winter wind and replacing it with the hum of the internal heaters. Maya snapped her head up. For a second, her red, swollen eyes widened in absolute shock, as if she were looking at a phantom. Then, she let out a loud, broken sob and launched her small body across the room, burying her face into my cold uniform. "Mom, you are alive," she wailed, her small hands gripping my jacket with desperate, terrifying strength. I dropped to my knees on the damp floor, wrapping my arms fiercely around her, kissing the top of her head while asking her what was going on. Between breathless, agonizing sobs, my innocent daughter revealed a truth so calculating and monstrous that it temporarily paralyzed me. Julian had told Maya, and every single elite guest inside that mansion, that I had been killed in a highly classified military operation exactly 6 months ago. Maya had been banished to the greenhouse for the entire evening because her genuine grief and crying would, according to Julian, ruin the delicate memorial atmosphere of his lavish party. Any normal person would have lost their mind. Any normal wife would have marched through those patio doors, shattered the champagne glasses, and physically destroyed the man who buried her alive. For one blinding fraction of a second, a primal rage threatened to consume me. But I am not just a betrayed wife. I am a senior commanding officer. In an instant, the burning fury inside my chest hardened into a terrifying, absolute calm. I gently wiped the tears from Maya's cheeks, looked her dead in the eyes, and promised her that everything was going to be perfectly fine. I did not go inside to confront Julian. I refused to give him the satisfaction of an emotional, dramatic scene. Instead, we moved like shadows. I led her quietly through the side entrance, packed a small duffel bag with her most treasured belongings and essential documents, wrapped her securely in my heavy military coat, and carried her out to my truck. I drove us away into the dark, silent blizzard, leaving Julian completely unaware that the ghost he created had just walked through his backyard, and that his total destruction was now inevitable. I drove 20 miles out of Pinecrest Ridge to a neighboring town, navigating the icy, treacherous roads with the precision of a tactical extraction. I did not take Maya to a standard motel where anyone could easily track us. Instead, I pulled into the underground parking garage of a high-security hotel specifically contracted for government officials and military personnel. The armed guards at the lobby recognized my credentials immediately, securing us a suite on the top floor with reinforced doors and restricted elevator access. Once inside, the sterile, rigid environment felt like a fortress. It was exactly what we needed. I ordered an enormous amount of hot, comforting room service, everything Maya loved. I sat beside her on the massive bed, holding her close, feeding her warm soup, and listening to her breathe until the deep exhaustion of the night finally pulled her into a peaceful, heavy sleep. I pulled the thick duvet up to her chin, kissed her forehead, and promised her quietly that she would never feel cold or alone again. With my daughter completely safe and dreaming, the mother in me stepped back, and the commanding officer took total control. I walked over to the heavy oak desk in the corner of the room, flipped open my encrypted military laptop, and established a secure, untraceable connection to the civilian network. I needed data. I needed to understand the exact mechanics of how my husband had managed to declare a high-ranking active duty officer dead without triggering a massive federal investigation, and more importantly, how he kept me completely blind to it. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing standard security protocols to access our joint financial and legal records. The digital paper trail unfolded before my eyes like a map of enemy territory. The first shocking discovery hit the screen within 10 minutes, just weeks before my deployment to the Ethelgard Tactical Hub. Julian had meticulously forged my signature on a comprehensive, irrevocable power of attorney document. He had legally granted himself total, unchecked control over my assets, my bank accounts, and my estate. But a fake document was not enough to stop the military from contacting my family. I dug deeper into the communication logs. Julian had hired a private, extremely expensive legal proxy firm to intercept and manage all official correspondence. He had effectively created a blackout zone, intercepting and blocking every single piece of civilian mail and legal notification destined for my remote base to the civilian world. My communications were being handled by my grieving widow. To my military superiors, I was simply on a highly classified, isolated rotation. It was a flawless, terrifyingly effective administrative blockade. But the absolute magnitude of his betrayal did not become clear until I cross-referenced his recent financial activities with the local news registries. I found a massive digital footprint regarding the lavish gala I had just witnessed. It was not a simple, extravagant Christmas party. It was a highly publicized, aggressively marketed launch event for a brand new charitable investment trust. The name of the fund made my blood run instantly cold. He called it Greta's Heart. According to the glossy, professionally designed website I pulled up, Greta's Heart was supposedly a foundation dedicated to supporting the families of fallen soldiers. In reality, it was a beautifully constructed, unregulated slush fund designed to siphon millions of dollars from wealthy, sympathetic investors. Julian was using my fabricated death, my decorated military record, and my honorable service as a tragic marketing tool to manipulate the elite business community into writing massive, tax-deductible checks. I leaned back in the leather chair, staring at the glowing screen. The puzzle pieces locked together with sickening clarity. Julian and his beautiful new fiancée, Vanessa, were not planning to stay in Pinecrest Ridge and play house. The charity was just the primary cash grab. I opened a separate tab and accessed my life insurance portal. There it was, an active, aggressively expedited claim on my massive military and private life insurance policies, totaling over $3 million. The final payout was scheduled to clear by the end of the month. Their endgame was glaringly obvious. They were going to collect the millions from the Greta's Heart investors, cash out my life insurance, liquidate the remaining assets, and vanish to a non-extradition country before anyone realized the grieving husband was a world-class con artist. Most people would have grabbed their phone, dialed 911, and screamed for the police to arrest him immediately. I did not. A standard police intervention would be messy, public, and potentially allow Julian to tie up the funds in endless legal battles, claiming it was all a terrible misunderstanding. I did not want a misunderstanding. I wanted utter, undeniable annihilation. A slow, freezing smile spread across my face. I closed the browser, picked up my encrypted mobile device, and dialed a highly secure number I had not used in 4 years. The line rang twice before a deep, gruff voice answered. It was Marcus, an old tactical squad mate who had retired from combat and was now a senior special agent for the Federal Investigation Bureau of Finance, better known as the FIB. "Greta," Marcus said, his voice laced with confusion. "I thought you were off the grid until February." "Change of plans." "Marcus," I replied, my voice steady, sharp, and completely devoid of emotion. "I am officially dead, and my husband is about to commit a multi-million-dollar federal fraud using my corpse as collateral. I need your team. I need complete operational secrecy, and I need to borrow the full weight of the United States government." There was a brief, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then, Marcus chuckled darkly. "Send me the coordinates. Major, let us go hunting." When the morning sun broke through the heavy gray clouds on December 25th, The sterile hotel suite felt warmer than my own house ever did. I had coordinated with the hotel concierge before dawn, sparing no expense to ensure the day was perfect. When Maya finally opened her eyes, she was greeted by a towering stack of brightly wrapped presents, a massive spread of buttermilk pancakes, hot chocolate, and fresh pastries. For the first few hours of the day, I completely shut off the tactical side of my brain. I sat on the carpeted floor with my daughter, tearing through shiny wrapping paper, building intricate electronic toy sets, and listening to her genuine, joyful laughter. It was a beautiful sound, the exact sound I had been fighting to return to for the last 6 months of my deployment. As she held a new stuffed animal tightly to her chest, she looked up at me with lingering hesitation in her dark eyes, silently asking if we would always have to hide like this. I pulled her onto my lap, smoothed her hair, and looked directly into her eyes. "Listen to me, sweetie," I said, my voice unwavering and fiercely protective. "Nobody will ever kick you out of your own home again. I swear it on my life." By 10 o'clock in the morning, Maya was comfortably curled up on the sofa watching animated holiday movies, completely absorbed in the bright television screen. I retreated to the heavy wooden desk in the corner of the room and reopened my encrypted military laptop. Marcus and his elite cyber division at the Federal Investigation Bureau were already online, ready to execute a synchronized digital raid on my husband's empire of lies. First, we targeted the money. I had zero intention of letting Julian move a single dime of our actual assets or the fraudulent donations he had illegally collected. Working alongside the federal hackers, we initiated a covert, airtight asset freeze across all our joint and personal bank accounts. But Marcus was brilliant. He knew that if Julian woke up, checked his banking application on his phone, and saw an available balance of 0, he would instantly panic, realize the jig was up, and flee the country. To prevent this, the agency's cyber team created a highly sophisticated, ghosted sandbox environment. They intercepted the unique Internet Protocol address from Julian's personal devices and rerouted his banking inquiries to a simulated federal server. Whenever he logged into his accounts from his phone or computer, he saw exactly what he expected to see: a beautifully inflated balance growing by the hour. He was staring at a digital mirage, completely oblivious to the fact that his real accounts were locked down in a federal vault that he could never touch again. With the financial perimeter entirely secured, I turned my attention to the so-called new lady of the house. I uploaded the high-resolution photographs I had taken of Vanessa through the greenhouse window directly into the agency's secure facial recognition database. It took the federal mainframe exactly 4 minutes to strip away her glamorous, high-society disguise. Her real name was Valerie Vance. She was not a wealthy socialite, and she certainly was not a loving stepmother. She was a career criminal and a professional grifter. Her federal rap sheet displayed a colorful history of highly organized scams, including 2 serious felony convictions for grand extortion and 3 separate counts of interstate wire fraud. Julian had not fallen in love. He had hired a seasoned, cold-blooded actress to play the role of the grieving, supportive partner. Valerie's job was exceptionally simple: wear the massive diamond ring, shed perfectly timed tears for the cameras, and manipulate the emotional vulnerabilities of the wealthy investors to maximize their charitable donations. They were a match made in hell, bound together purely by the prospect of a multi-million-dollar payday. Just as I was reading through Valerie's extensive parole violations, a sharp notification pinged on my screen. It was an urgent alert from my personal cloud storage drive. Before my deployment, I had left my old civilian smartphone securely locked in the bottom drawer of my home office desk, heavily synced to my private cloud account. I opened the live data feed and watched in absolute chilling disgust as a series of newly generated text messages populated my monitor. Julian was sitting in my house, holding my old phone, and having a fabricated, psychotic conversation with his own device. He was meticulously typing out desperate, frantic messages from my number, claiming I was drowning in massive, illegal gambling debts. He forged lengthy texts where I supposedly confessed that I could not handle the intense pressure of military life anymore and was planning to take my own life to avoid a disgraceful court-martial. He was building an airtight, physical alibi. He knew that if the military or the insurance companies ever launched a formal investigation into my sudden, undocumented death, he would eagerly present my old phone as the tragic, indisputable proof of my suicide. What the arrogant fool did not realize was that I was watching his every keystroke in real time. I was capturing live screen recordings of him systematically forging federal evidence and digging his own grave deeper with every single word he typed. My secure communication line buzzed. It was Marcus. "I just reviewed the cloud data you forwarded to my terminal," he said, his voice completely devoid of humor and strictly professional. "Your husband just crossed the point of no return. We have him dead to rights on federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, forging Department of Defense records, and first-degree money laundering. The mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines will put him away for at least 20 years. Say the word, Major, and I will have a tactical strike team kick his front door down in 5 minutes and drag him out in handcuffs." I stared at the glowing screen, watching Julian type another pathetic, fake apology from my stolen number. A cold, dark satisfaction settled deep into my bones, replacing the lingering sting of his betrayal. "No, Marcus," I replied evenly, my voice as sharp as a newly sharpened combat knife. "Arresting him in his pajamas on Christmas morning is far too quiet. I do not just want a divorce, and I do not want him to quietly disappear into a prison cell. He built a massive, public stage to parade my ghost in front of the whole city. I want him to stand on that stage. I want him to believe he has won everything, that he has secured his millions, and that he is completely untouchable." I closed my laptop with a sharp, decisive snap. We let him host his big press conference, and then we burn his entire world to the ground while the cameras are rolling. 3 days after Christmas, the trap was fully set. It was the 28th of December, and Julian's unchecked arrogance had officially reached its absolute peak. He had orchestrated a massive, highly publicized press conference at the city's Grand Convention Center. His ultimate goal was to publicly sign the legal paperwork and officially secure a staggering $10 million injection from a major investment syndicate into his fraudulent charity. He wanted the money, but he also wanted the glory, the fame, and the untouchable status of a grieving philanthropist. But first, he had to clear the board. He could not risk my daughter, Maya, ruining his perfect, tragic aesthetic with her genuine questions or her unpredictable grief. Early that morning, he arranged for a private luxury shuttle to take her away to an isolated, month-long winter retreat, deep in the snowy mountains. He told her it was for her own mental health, a quiet place to heal. What Julian did not know was that the driver steering that private shuttle was an undercover federal operative working directly for Marcus. Exactly halfway down the interstate, far from Julian's watchful eyes, my team intercepted the vehicle. I pulled Maya out of the back seat, wrapped her tightly in a warm fleece coat, and brought her directly to a secure, heavily monitored VIP suite, located in the upper control levels of the convention center itself. The room was soundproof and strictly off-limits to the public. I sat her down in a comfortable leather chair in front of a massive flat-screen television. The monitor was hardwired directly into the closed-circuit camera feeds of the main exhibition hall below. I handed her a cup of hot chocolate and knelt in front of her, looking deeply into her eyes. "I need you to stay right here and watch the screen, sweetie," I told her, keeping my voice incredibly steady and calm. "You are going to see your father tell a lot of lies today, but I promise you, by the time I am done, he will never be able to lie to us or hurt us ever again." Maya nodded bravely, gripping the warm cup with both hands, her eyes fixed on the glowing monitor. Down in the grand hall, the scene was meticulously crafted for maximum emotional manipulation. Hundreds of plush velvet chairs were filled with wealthy venture capitalists, local politicians, and sympathetic high society philanthropists. A row of professional television cameras from 4 different local news networks formed a solid wall at the back of the room, broadcasting the event live to the entire state. A massive, professionally printed banner reading "Greta's Heart" hung proudly above the main stage. Julian stepped up to the polished mahogany podium, adjusting his expensive designer tie with a practiced look of profound grief. Standing faithfully by his side was his accomplice, Valerie. She was wearing a modest, elegant black dress, her head bowed in fake sorrow, while she dabbed her perfectly dry eyes with a delicate silk handkerchief. Julian leaned into the microphone, his voice trembling just enough to sound completely authentic. He began weaving his sickening narrative, painting himself as the devastated, heartbroken widower struggling every single day to carry on the profound legacy of his poor, heroic late wife. While he was busy captivating the audience with his grand performance, I was standing in the freezing winter wind right outside the convention center's grand glass entrance. I had shed the tactical field gear and the casual civilian clothes. I was dressed in my immaculate, highest-ranking senior officer dress uniform. The dark, formal fabric was perfectly pressed, sharply tailored to my frame. The left breast of my jacket was heavy with genuine, hard-earned combat medals, commendations, and service ribbons that reflected the blinding flashes of the city traffic lights. I stepped out of the heavy, black-armored sport utility vehicle and adjusted my collar. All around me, a masterpiece of federal coordination was unfolding in total, terrifying silence. Marcus had deployed 30 plainclothes agents from the Federal Investigation Bureau. They moved like absolute ghosts through the crowded lobby and the surrounding hallways. 2 agents positioned themselves casually near the service elevators, pretending to read the daily schedule. 4 more heavily armed operatives blocked the emergency fire exits at the back of the building. The rest blended seamlessly into the crowd of security personnel, standing securely by the main doors, permanently sealing every possible avenue of escape. Julian and Valerie were completely trapped inside a massive, invisible federal net, and they did not have the slightest clue that their freedom was already gone. I walked slowly up the wide concrete steps, my polished leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the pavement. My posture was absolutely rigid, my chin held high. I felt no anger anymore, no lingering sadness, and no hesitation. I only felt the cold, mechanical precision of an executioner stepping up to the chopping block. I bypassed the standard security checkpoints without a single word. The private guards had already been quietly replaced by Marcus's federal agents, who simply gave me a crisp nod and stepped aside as I approached the massive, double oak doors of the main exhibition hall. Through the thick, heavy wood, I could clearly hear Julian's voice echoing from the surround sound speakers inside. He was just reaching the emotional climax of his carefully rehearsed speech, telling the captivated crowd about the ultimate sacrifice I had supposedly made in the line of duty, and how this $10 million fund would ensure my memory lived on forever. I did not wait for him to finish his sentence. I placed both of my hands flat against the heavy brass handles. With one sharp, incredibly powerful thrust, I shoved the massive doors wide open. The heavy metallic hinges let out a loud, piercing shriek that echoed like a gunshot through the cavernous hall. The sharp, violent sound sliced straight through Julian's trembling words, cutting his fraudulent speech dead in its tracks. The deafening silence that followed was absolute. Every single head in the massive convention center snapped toward the entrance. Over 500 wealthy investors, politicians, and media personnel turned in their velvet chairs, completely frozen. The heavy wooden doors slammed against the walls, and I stepped across the threshold. The blinding glare of the television studio lights hit my polished dress shoes, traveling up the crisp, dark fabric of my military uniform, catching the metallic gleam of my combat medals, and finally resting on my face. For 3 agonizingly long seconds, nobody breathed. The collective confusion in the room was a physical weight. Then, a single, sharp gasp erupted from the front row. A local news anchor, someone who had covered my supposed tragic death extensively for the past 6 months, dropped her digital tablet onto the floor. The loud clatter shattered the spell. I began my descent down the long, plush crimson carpet of the center aisle. I did not rush. I walked with the slow, measured, undeniable authority of a commanding officer inspecting her troops. My leather shoes struck the floor with a rhythmic, heavy cadence. With every step I took, the whispers ignited, spreading through the crowd like a wildfire. People were pointing, covering their open mouths in sheer terror and disbelief. The camera operators at the back of the room frantically pivoted their heavy lenses away from the stage and zoomed directly into my face, broadcasting my resurrection live to millions of viewers across the state. Up on the brightly lit stage, the perfectly constructed illusion of Julian's life was instantly violently disintegrating. All the blood rapidly drained from his handsome face, leaving him looking like a sick, hollow wax figure. His jaw hung open, trembling uncontrollably. His perfectly manicured fingers went entirely numb, and the expensive wireless microphone slipped right through his grasp. It hit the wooden floorboard with a harsh, deafening crack, sending a sharp wave of audio feedback screaming through the towering speakers. He tried to take a step backward, but his knees buckled slightly. He was staring at me as if the devil himself had just kicked down the doors of heaven. Standing beside him, his beautiful accomplice realized the catastrophic danger much faster than he did. Valerie Vance was a seasoned predator, and she possessed the survival instincts of a cornered rat. She took one look at my immaculate military uniform, glanced down at the rapidly shifting crowd, and instantly abandoned her fake tears. She let go of Julian's arm, picked up the skirt of her elegant black dress, and sprinted fiercely toward the side VIP exit behind the velvet curtains. She did not even make it 10 feet. From the shadows of the backstage area, 2 towering men in sharp gray suits stepped directly into her path. They were Marcus's elite federal agents. Valerie shrieked and tried to claw her way past them, but the agents moved with terrifying, practiced efficiency. One agent grabbed her wrist, twisting it smoothly behind her back, while the other forced her down to her knees right there on the edge of the polished stage. The cold, heavy click of steel handcuffs echoed through the silent hall. "Valerie Vance," the lead agent announced, his deep voice carrying easily across the stunned front rows. "You are under arrest for 2 counts of grand extortion, interstate wire fraud, and violating your federal parole. You have the right to remain silent, and I highly suggest you start using it right now." The crowd erupted into absolute chaos. Shouts of anger, confusion, and panic bounced off the high ceilings. Investors were jumping out of their seats, but I did not stop walking. I reached the front of the hall, climbed the short set of wooden stairs, and stepped onto the stage. Julian was completely paralyzed, hyperventilating, his expensive suit suddenly looking 3 sizes too big for his shrinking, pathetic frame. I did not even look at him yet. I calmly leaned down, picked up the discarded microphone from the floor, and turned to face the chaotic sea of people. "Ladies and gentlemen," I spoke, my voice ringing out with crystal clear, unwavering command, easily slicing through the noise and instantly silencing the enormous room. "I sincerely apologize for the dramatic interruption. My name is Major Greta Schroeder. As you can all clearly see, the reports of my death have been significantly exaggerated." A shockwave of gasps ripped through the audience. I turned my head slightly toward the back of the hall and gave a subtle, deliberate nod to the soundboard booth. Marcus was already sitting at the control deck. With the press of a single button, he hijacked the entire digital presentation. The massive, towering projection screen behind me, which previously displayed the fraudulent Greta's Heart Charity logo, suddenly flickered and went entirely black. A second later, the screen ignited with undeniable, catastrophic federal evidence. "The man standing behind me," I continued, pacing slowly across the stage, completely dominating the space, "did not organize this event to honor my memory. He organized it to empty your bank accounts." I pointed up at the massive screen. The first image was a high-resolution scan of the forged power of attorney document, side by side with a professional forensic handwriting analysis proving the signature was entirely fake. The next slide rapidly populated with complex bank routing numbers, offshore accounts, and the aggressively expedited life insurance claims Julian had filed just 3 weeks ago. Every single dollar you intended to donate today, I announced to the horrified investors, was routed directly into a private, untraceable shell corporation located in a non-extradition territory. The woman currently wearing handcuffs on the floor is not a grieving stepmother. She is a convicted federal felon hired to play a role. My husband faked my death, intercepted my military correspondence, and intended to take your $10 million and flee the country by midnight. The reaction from the crowd was visceral. The wealthy philanthropists, who just minutes ago had been wiping away sympathetic tears, were now glaring at Julian with pure, unadulterated hatred. You could practically feel the temperature in the room drop as their sympathy morphed into violent, righteous fury. Julian completely broke. The overwhelming weight of his public annihilation crushed whatever remaining pride he had. He collapsed onto his knees in the middle of the stage, right in front of the blinding television cameras. Tears of absolute panic streamed down his face, ruining his expensive makeup. He crawled toward me, his hands shaking violently as he reached out to grab the hem of my military trousers. "Greta, please," he sobbed hysterically, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "Please, you have to listen to me. I did not want to do this. It was her. Valerie manipulated me. She seduced me and told me we could get away with it. I love you." "Greta, I am so sorry. Please do not let them take me. I am begging you." He was weeping like a terrified child, publicly throwing his partner to the wolves, begging for mercy from the woman he had tried to erase from the earth. I stood perfectly still, looking down at the sniveling, broken creature crying at my boots. I did not scream. I did not yell. The fury inside me was so deeply refined, so flawlessly cold, that I did not need to raise my voice. I slowly crouched down, bringing my face just inches from his ear. The microphones could not pick up my voice, but I made sure every single syllable burned directly into his brain. "You could lie to me," I whispered, my voice as sharp and deadly as a razor blade sliding across his throat. "But you are never allowed to leave my daughter out in the cold. The death you created is now yours." I stood back up, my posture rigid, and stepped away from him. That was the final cue. 3 federal agents stormed the stage. They grabbed Julian roughly by the shoulders, hauling him up from the floor. He kicked and screamed, wailing my name in absolute terror as they violently twisted his arms behind his back and slapped the heavy steel cuffs onto his wrists. The cameras captured every single humiliating second of his arrest, broadcasting his total destruction to the entire world. As the agents dragged Julian and Valerie off the stage and out through the heavy side doors, a profound silence washed over the room once more. Then, an elderly, prominent venture capitalist in the front row stood up. He looked at me with deep, immense respect and began to clap. Within seconds, the entire convention center erupted. 500 people rose to their feet, delivering a deafening, thunderous standing ovation. They were cheering, applauding, and thanking me for tearing down the scam of the century. I did not smile for the cameras, and I did not wave to the crowd. I simply looked up past the blinding stage lights, aiming my eyes directly at the dark, tinted glass of the VIP control room high above the auditorium. I gave a crisp, perfect military salute. I knew Maya was up there, watching the screens, completely safe, knowing with absolute certainty that her mother had just protected her from the monsters, and that we had finally won. The federal justice system moved with unprecedented speed when the evidence was that absolute. Exactly 4 months later, Julian and Valerie stood before a stern federal judge and were officially handed decades-long prison sentences without the slightest possibility of parole. Every single stolen asset, every hidden offshore account, and the fraudulent life insurance payouts were completely confiscated, untangled, and returned intact to my name. I had absolutely no desire to keep the massive estate in Pinecrest Ridge. Its towering walls and cold marble floors were permanently infected with the bitter memory of his lies. I immediately sold the multi-million-dollar property and used a fraction of the money to buy a beautiful, peaceful little farm nestled near the edge of a vibrant national forest. It featured a sprawling, open property, far bigger and brighter than that suffocating glass greenhouse. Here, Maya was entirely free to run, explore, and play in every single room and across every acre of land. She would never be asked to step outside and hide ever again. The dark shadows of that terrible winter night have completely faded from my sweet daughter's eyes. Maya is incredibly energetic now, constantly smiling, and remarkably proud of our little family. The trauma did not break her spirit. Instead, she grew stronger, because she learned the most important lesson I could ever teach her. Genuine love is not just about gentle words. It is about absolute, fierce, and unyielding protection. In the chaotic weeks following the arrests, major news networks and prominent talk shows constantly begged me for exclusive interviews, offering massive payouts for my story. I politely rejected every single one of them. I did not need the fame, and I certainly did not need the public validation. Instead, I quietly negotiated a much more flexible assignment with my military superiors, allowing me to continue serving my country with honor while ensuring I was home every single evening to help Maya with her homework. Exactly 1 year later, the thick winter snow fell gracefully outside the windows of our rustic farmhouse. Inside, the spacious living room was glowing with the intense, comforting warmth of a crackling stone fireplace. Maya and I were wrapped in thick woolen sweaters, laughing uncontrollably as we tried to untangle a massive string of bright holiday lights to decorate our fresh pine tree. As I lifted my beautiful daughter into the air so she could place the golden star on the very highest branch, a profound, unshakable peace washed over my soul. Looking at her bright, genuine smile, I finally understood the ultimate truth. The most perfect revenge was not watching my enemies rot in a concrete cell. The greatest revenge was building a life so brilliantly, overwhelmingly happy that a traitor never even had the right to step foot inside it. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for listening to this story today. We would love to know, where in the world are you tuning in from right now? If you found today's journey compelling, please help us keep this channel alive by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon. There, you can listen to our absolute best, highly exclusive true stories that feature intense details and emotional voice acting we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can easily support us by scanning the QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the Patreon link located in the description or the pinned comment below. Thank you once again, and please take care of yourselves.